I'm sure you guys, a lot of you have been waiting for this one. As you know, Miami's kind of at the center of blockchain and cryptocurrency mania right now. A lot of us may be wondering what that all means. Should we be investing in ICOs? Should we be collecting crypto kitties? What's the deal here? So we've got a great panel here now to talk to you about all things disruption and all things blockchain, from smart contracts to currency, security, all kinds of stuff. So let's learn from these experts, and please join me in welcoming Sam Abbassi. He's a partner at Bushido Labs. All right. Thanks, Sam. Welcome. Nick Briz. He's the creative director of Briz. Hi. Welcome. And Albert Santalo is the founder and CEO of 8base. All right. And my colleague, Chris Sopher, who gets to have this fun convo with you guys today. Thank you.
Hello, hello. There we go. Hey, everybody. We're going to be talking about blockchain and all the things related to it. This is a topic, particularly given how many of you there are, in which there is a lot of interest. We're going to be talking a lot today about some of the non-traditional, potentially unexpected or uncommon, less well-known applications of blockchain, in particular where I know from talking to our awesome panelists here in advance, they're really excited about the future even more than some of the things you've probably heard the most about, like cryptocurrency. But before we start any of that, I, in journalistic fashion, have to ask what the thing actually is. It's like at the top of the article where they try to explain it to you. And Nick has volunteered as a frequent teacher around blockchain-related things to try and give us his 30-second, what is blockchain in layperson terms. So we'll see if he can do it here to put you on the spot, Nick.
Yeah, and I'm gonna drastically oversimplify, so apologies to the blockchain experts. So the blockchain, like one way that I like to think about it is as a document. Think about it like as a document that contains a list. And anybody can add something to that list, but you can't change something that's already been added to that list. And that list is not kept in a server or a centralized place like most data that we deal with today online, but is actually distributed across everybody's computer who's participating in this particular blockchain, which brings in the second part, which is that it's also a network of people running a small app on their computer that connects them to all those other peers, such that they can all have a copy of this list on their computer, and they can add items to that list on that computer. So there's a lot that you can do with that. One of the things we've seen that one of the most popular uses has been sort of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. So that list could be a list of transactions. And then you now have a distributed list of transactions, and thus it's sort of distributed or decentralized currency. But yeah, one of the things we want to talk about here is that is only sort of one of a potentially millions of sort of applications that you can do with that concept.
How'd he do? Pretty good? All right. Raise your hand if you understand the blockchain. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so I do want to grab some questions, too, if folks have them as we get into it. But first, I want to ask our panelists to, by way of introducing themselves, tell us one application of the blockchain that they're particularly excited about or where they're seeing a lot of energy, whether it's one they work on or one completely different, an application they're excited about. Albert, do you want to kick us off?
So I'll talk about us at 8base. A lot of the work that's been done on blockchain has been done at the protocol level. It's sort of like if we equate that to the internet, a lot of the work that's been done on TCP/IP. So when we were at the TCP/IP phase of the internet, none of us were using it, right? It was when the web browser and technologies like that came out that we began using it. So 8base has that same kind of democratizing effect. We're the tool set, the next layer of infrastructure that lives on top of blockchain that allows normal people to build applications on blockchain.
Awesome. Okay, and actually, why don't we go to you, Sam, and then we'll wrap up with you, Nick.
Yeah, so my name is Sam Abbassi. I'm partner and engineer at the Bushido Lab. So we do blockchain development and research. One of the things I'm most excited about really are kind of decentralized governance. So like Nick stated, it really isn't so much about the coin only. It's also about how it facilitates and really what it facilitates and why people are using it in the first place. So this aspect of this new type of business model, really, of corporations that aren't necessarily centrally governed, is something that we really do a lot of research and development in, and something that we're pushing through really hard. The three main projects that we're working on now are leveraging that kind of decentralized governance ecosystem where people have a reason to come in and out. And we're also working on a coin protocol that I can't talk about now, but I would love to talk about it with you guys afterwards.
Okay, so top secret coin protocol. That's something to be excited about. So one of the things that's been happening is there's been a lot of movement around sort of using blockchain for verification and trust, since this sort of decentralized system is at the heart of it. And one of the things we've heard a lot about is people thinking about it for ways to essentially create a ledger of things that have happened or where things have come from, and be able to use that to create a different kind of trust than we have today, where, you know, for example, in cryptocurrency, you trust that the banking institutions have a certain set of policies because there's laws around it and they have practices and there's an industry there and so forth. Something different is happening around trust with the blockchain. And one of the examples that y'all brought up when we chatted before the panel was about sort of fine art, for example, and being able to verify the provenance of something. Where has it been? Who's had it? And I wonder if we might talk about some of those applications for trust while this vacuum cleaner gets started.
Yeah, and I could chime in on the provenance and art. So in case folks aren't familiar, so provenance refers to sort of the history of ownership, at least in the art context, the history of ownership behind a work of art. And it actually plays a really important role in fine art. So I'm a creative director at Briz, and my background is actually in fine art, sort of fine art and code. And you know, this is important for a few reasons. When a collector wants to sell a piece of work at an auction, one of the tools used to ensure that that's not a forgery and they in fact own that work of art is that provenance, is that record, is that history, that yeah, they are the last person to have owned this piece, and thus this piece is likely the right piece that we're going to auction out. Also, it plays a role in the value of a work of art, for better or worse. The history of the people who've owned that work plays a huge role in its current value. So maintaining that provenance is really important, and that ultimately falls to the auction houses or galleries to ensure that they have this record, and that, you know, that might be paper pen sort of record. And so you have to, again, trust these institutions. So there have been a lot of folks experimenting with moving that tracking of provenance onto a blockchain. So again, the idea is, as people sort of sell the physical work of art, the transfer of ownership, the contract, if you will, happens on this particular blockchain. And now you have a cryptographically unbreakable, sort of proven, trustworthy record of all the previous owners. Again, both to verify that person selling it is in fact the true owner, but also that history, who owned it all the way back to the beginning of that work's life.
And just to expand on that, so the provenance is important in art, for instance, but taking that same model and applying it to land titles is something a lot of people have done research on as well. India has this problem where the registration to the land isn't necessarily documented, or even if it isn't necessarily trustable, because there is a central organization that's controlling it. So if you put that onto a blockchain, then that itself is not only transferable, but it's also immutable, so it cannot be changed. So there's several use cases that can be applied.
And what I would... What I would add to that is that, because most people I don't think know this, because we hear a lot of stuff about blockchain and Bitcoin and all this stuff, but blockchain is the most secure technology ever invented, ever rolled out in the world. The Bitcoin blockchain has been in production since 2009 and has never been hacked. Even with billions and billions of wealth tied up in it, it has never been hacked. So this is what makes this possible, and this is what makes this concept of a trustless system possible. And so this is extremely disruptive, especially to people who sit in the middle of transactions, like banks, right? Like people who deal with titles of real estate, like title insurance, right? Why do you need title insurance if I can transfer my title from me to you? You can trust that title is original, and now you own it, right? And there's no intermediary. And so we're very, very early stages of the rollout of this, but this is going to have a massive disruptive effect on things as we head down the path.
So and that's actually. I was going to ask you. One of the things that brings up is that business processes are being disrupted in a really big way, and is there a way to know sort of what processes are going to encounter that disruption? Who's going to be affected by it, and how is that landscape going to change? What other parts of the business ecosystem are liable to be moved by the blockchain in this way?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of answers to that question. But maybe one might be, especially maybe even connecting that to the conversation of provenance, is there's also the sort of tracking the history of things that we maybe don't normally track. So there's the transactions that currently are sort of already sort of being taken care of by sort of central points of authority, and then there's what haven't we been tracking because it's maybe more difficult, at least in this sort of transparent way. So you might think of like supply chain. So as something moves through a supply chain, if that exchange is sort of being tracked and recorded on a blockchain, you now have transparency, again, because it's immutable, not forgeable. You can have transparency in that supply chain, and that's of interest to a lot of, say, millennials who want to know where things are coming from and what hands they've passed through, and so there's even opportunity for things that we haven't tracked to be tracked and recorded in this way. Yeah, and.
No, I think an important business or enterprise level application of blockchain really is within the next 5 years. So I really think any major corporation that has multiple different regional offices with different admin controls will be using a blockchain of sorts. Now, the issue is the only way it can get hacked really is for people. I mean, the protocol is bulletproof. You can't really break through that. It's a matter of the political nature of the people that are actually implementing the protocol is how it can get hacked. So businesses right now, their current business models do not and are not compatible with a public, true blockchain. At least not the way that Satoshi and his cohorts created in the first place. So permission blockchains, I think, are huge. Hyperledger is a Linux Foundation-led organization, an umbrella group that has multiple different projects within it. So Intel, IBM, all have different projects. And it kind of is a worse blockchain, really. But it is kind of like the intermediary to get to the true, groundbreaking, revolutionizing, blockchain application that we hopefully will get to.
So what do we make of cryptocurrency's role in this space? It's certainly taken over the conversation in some ways that's perceptible to most of the public about the blockchain technology. Is sort of the first words out of anyone's mouth are often Bitcoin or ICOs, these other kinds of things. What are we to make of cryptocurrency being this kind of leading edge, introducing this idea to most people? And is that, should we be upset about that? Should we be worried about that? Is it good that this is how it's been introduced? What do we make of cryptocurrency's role in all of this?
So I think it's good. All we really need to understand about cryptocurrencies and blockchain is that cryptocurrencies is the first use case of blockchain. So it's not the only use case of blockchain, but it's the first one. And at this point, it's a ubiquitous one. It's one that if you want to buy cryptocurrencies, you can go out and do it. And it's not a wonderful process. It's not user friendly, but you can do it. You might even be able to make money or lose money in it. And but unless you give away your passwords to your own personal Coinbase account or whatever it might be, the blockchain is going to make sure that you're not going to get hacked. But what's really, really important is what's coming after the cryptocurrency use case, in my opinion.
I mean, with respect to cryptos. I think the bigger question and the question that cryptos try to answer is what is value, right? Like we don't really, at least from the people I've spoken to, we've kind of lost perception of what value really is, and there's things that people find valuable that we don't really have a means of exchange or a way to represent as it stands, right? There's cultural capital, natural capital, social capital, not just utility capital. We live in an industrial economy, but now people have a way to arbitrarily dictate what or at least create a representation of value for what they think would facilitate an economy or ecosystem. So cryptocurrencies, are the first use case, and right now they're dirty. Right now it's a couple people. I mean, Bitcoin, the mining pools, I think there's 12 mining pools that really control Bitcoin. So it is very primitive in its current application, but it is kind of, in a very abstract way, the beginnings of what it can be. So there can be coins and tokens and different things that can represent what you want in an ecosystem that people can arbitrarily come in and out. And that governance and protocol is set by the different stakeholders in there. So cryptos are just the beginning. Yeah.
So I want to grab some questions from y'all. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to do that, but it seems like there's a lot of you and you have questions. So we'll do that in just a second. The one thing I wanted to go back to, you've all made a point in different ways about sort of the technology itself is largely impenetrable, or at least nearly impenetrable. But we are not, right, as users of it, whether that's with currency or for goods and services or even for transactions in different ways. what would you like to see happen as this space evolves to make sure that the kind of public trust and interperson trust that's required for something to work happens? Because it seems like what you're saying is there's this underlying technology that has immense amount of promise, and now humans are the part of it that has to match that. And what needs to happen? What regulation needs to be in place? What kinds of practices need to happen in order for this technology to kind of take advantage of these opportunities that you've laid out for us, but meet with the kinds of societal expectations that we all have for it?
Yeah, well, one thing, and this is maybe grand and abstract, but really important, I think, is literacy around the technology. Folks who seek to take advantage of others, say with a sort of a Ponzi scheme ICO, are dependent on the fact that those falling prey to that scam have no idea how this works and really what it is, and things happen. And even literacy around the idea that, like, if you have Bitcoin, what it means to own Bitcoin, for example, is that you have a wallet, which really just means a key. You have an address that's part of these transactions, and you have authority over transferring the token that was once held within that key, and you need a password to unlock that key. And if you forget that password, you can kiss all of it goodbye. And people think, well, can I just call someone? It's like, no, this is cryptography. Without that password, no one has access to it. So just literacy around the technology, I think, is really important to sort of laying a foundation where folks can understand where the value lies, and then also just to have conversations, collaborate and innovate around that technology.
I mean, look, I think Bitcoin's been controversial since its first day. I think that's actually kind of a lesser issue these days. I mean, whether you buy into it or not, I think Bitcoin's here to stay. I think cryptocurrencies are here to stay. And they will probably at some point dominate the landscape. Believe it or not, I believe that cryptocurrencies are superior to regular currency. It's superior to the US dollar in its form and function. Bitcoin can't be used as a currency today because it's too volatile. But if you really think about it, it's not counterfeitable, right? So say that again, it's not counterfeitable. The US dollar is, and there's a huge operation in the US government in the Secret Service to take care of counterfeiting. That can all be eliminated. You don't need a minting operation. There's a whole bunch of advantages, right? It goes out to 8 decimal places. But the real part where I think we need to really mature is on the whole ICO token sale area. There's been a lot of scams. There's been, I sort of say a lot of the people that have done these have been, they've been allowed to do it. They're people that can't find jobs and people that can't get regular venture funding, and somehow they've been able to go secure some of that funding. There's some good companies that have done it too. But there's a lot that probably don't deserve to have raised the money they raised, and they will be problematic. Similar to what happened in the dot-com days, right? In the dot-com days, the money was flowing, and you had pets.com, which anybody who's probably 40 years or younger maybe never heard of. But you also had amazon.com. And so in the world of cryptos and blockchain, what I say is, look, try to be amazon.com, try not to be pets.com. But this is a really hard thing to solve, just one quick thing, because it's not a US phenomena. It's not even a Western phenomena. The dot-coms was a US thing, right? This is a global thing. So we're competing in a global market. Global regulatory standards really are few and far between. So it's a hard problem to solve, but it needs to be solved.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what I wanted to point out next. I think the issue, at least right now, in terms of mass adoption for technological literacy is that, and I see this with my team, I mean, we have a team of 8, and I really call ourselves a think tank. We're constantly looking at different protocols and trying to see how we can manipulate and make them better. But this is low-level computer science as it stands right now. I think regulation is really the first step, because if there's sensible regulation, then more people are going to be involved in the space. Some of the smartest developers I've met won't even touch or go near cryptocurrency. And it kills me because I know they could really do well if they just do. But that's because it really is a Wild West right now. I think sensible regulation that doesn't hinder our ability to develop would be huge, because as Albert just stated, this is a worldwide phenomenon. So we will fall behind. I mean, I come from a country where there's a brain drain and everyone leaves to the West. And I like that because we develop here. But if we impose too many regulations, then the reverse is going to happen, and that's not what I think any of us want.
So, anybody have a question for our panelists about this stuff? Sir, you have to speak up because it's a little hard to hear up here.
How affordable is like to store and save this information? While saving information is good, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah. How affordable? The question was about how affordable it is to store and save this information, since you have to record it somewhere. You know, how do you protect the information in ways that are cost effective?
I mean, look, I sort of attended the Wayne Gretzky School of Business, where you skate to where the puck is going, not to where it's been. The truth is, the cost of disk storage, 20 years ago was very, very high compared to today. So there's innovation that's happening in the blockchain, and there's different forms of blockchain that will come out that will make, I believe that it will make that a non-issue. It's not here today, because as you point out, the cost of mining, for instance, is very, very extensive. But what's the cost of all the middlemen in a process, right? So eventually that kind of cost value curve is going to hit an inflection point, and then it's going to be easy to understand where this is.
So the question was about what happens to the value of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency as people lose their wallet or other things happen if Bitcoin leaves circulation.
Yeah, so that's a huge problem now, and it always has been. I mean, it's I think it's estimated that 20% of Bitcoin is simply missing because in the beginning people had it on their phones and on their laptops and places that they just wouldn't really secure, and they would throw it away and they would lose all this Bitcoin. I remember listening to Charlie Shrem talk about hacks in like Mt. Gox, for instance. But back then in 2013, I mean, what exactly were you supposed to do? You couldn't go to the police and tell them that someone stole my magic internet money. Like, it just wouldn't exactly work. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge problem, and Bitcoin's value, can go up and down, but that's what the forks are for. That's why there's so many different cryptos. People kind of talk about that in a negative light, that every day there's a new cryptocurrency, but every new cryptocurrency has a new protocol, and every new protocol is useful for a certain type of people. So I'm not so concerned at Bitcoin's value at all. I mean, I almost never look at the market price. To me, it doesn't matter right now.
Sir, you had one, and then ma'am, sir, and then maybe one more, sir, and then we'll go to you. It'll be last question. I didn't actually hear that. Did you guys hear that? No. Can you speak up?
We can't hear you. Tezos.
Oh. Okay. The question was about Tezos.
I mean, I'm not an expert on Tezos, but poorly run ICO.
There we go. All right, that was a quick one.
Do you see the processing power needed to support the blockchain ledger as being an issue in the future? It's a huge amount of processing power, like 60% right now.
So the question was about, a huge amount of the world's processing power on computers is going to mining cryptocurrency and supporting the ledger and so forth. Are they concerned about that? What do we see happening with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest problems in blockchain right now. But with different consensus protocols, like what Ethereum is doing from proof of work to proof of stake, should ameliorate that to a certain extent. It's not going to fix it altogether. But again, like Albert stated, the cost of having middlemen does really outweigh that.
Sure.
When I hear that the blockchain is bulletproof and impenetrable, I'm immediately skeptical of that. What makes that true?
This is a great question. These are all great questions. Thanks for asking questions. When he hears the blockchain is impenetrable, his reaction, as is mine, is to be immediately skeptical of that. Like, nothing is impenetrable. So, how true is that, and what makes that true?
I mean, it's a technical answer that probably takes longer than we have here, but it's a combination of the cryptography and the decentralization and the consensus algorithm that exists between the different nodes in the network. The cryptography itself is very, very robust, and the data is organized in blocks, and the pointers between the blocks are literally derivatives of the data in the blocks. So if you went in to change information in the first block, you would have to change every subsequent block, its hash, its cryptography. It's an impossible computer problem to solve. Potentially, the only thing that could hack something like that is potentially a quantum computer, But since we don't have those right now, we don't know.
So,
But when we do,
maybe one day in the
yeah.
future. I'm sorry, who did I say was next, ma'am? And then we'll go to you. Okay, so the question was about the future of healthcare as it relates to the blockchain and cryptocurrency.
So blockchain has huge applications in healthcare. Right now, I'm not working on any of those, by the way. But I mean, look, I look at it as two sides. On the health record side, we don't have ubiquitous health records, right? And one of the issues with health records is privacy, security, and also the sort of the ability to access it whenever you need it as part of your identity. Notice that we all don't have sort of a universal patient identifier. Why is that? It's a privacy issue. But in the blockchain, we could have our health records in the blockchain, and we could have them sort of, encoded so no one could understand them. And that would have huge value for society. On the financial and administrative side, right, if you think about an insurance claim in healthcare, what a nightmare that is and how much cost is associated with adjudicating that claim. You could have a blockchain that was all about healthcare transactions and their adjudication, and that would be of tremendous value. Now, will healthcare ever create any of this? I don't know. It's a very broken industry.
So I'm going to get our last question in just a second, and then I'm going to ask our panelists for their recommendations on great places to learn or plug in more into blockchain and learn about the whole space as it's happening. So the question was about the future of the financial services industry and blockchain. How will the financial services industry adapt and evolve as this technology disrupts or potentially it changes it?
Well, I mean, the financial services industry is a very broad kind of category. But if you look at basic transactions and how they occur today, probably the most exaggerated example is think of how inefficient Western Union is, or a SWIFT transaction, sort of an international wire transfer. How much do you pay for that? You pay a lot of money. So imagine if you could just do that on blockchain with no intermediary. That would be of huge value. So in essence, the way I see it is financial services businesses, the transactional part of what they do could largely go away. This is probably going to take a few decades, in my opinion. It won't happen overnight. It won't even happen as fast as the internet, I think. But it will happen.
Yeah, I think the part about Western Union just clicked a light bulb in my head. I have a lot of people that come to me and talk about remittances abroad. And that's one of the kind of financial services aspect of blockchain that I love, is for people in countries like Venezuela, people in countries like Zimbabwe and Iran, who do need to store their value secretly and do need to privately send the money out. And cryptocurrencies in particular, and blockchain more specifically, does actually allow that to happen on a real-time basis and solves a problem that they face every day.
Nick? Cool. All right, so just one last question. Make it fast. This is a great question to wrap us up with. What happens to kind of quasi-governmental entities like OPEC, or did you say OFAC? OPEC, like OPEC, and how commodities are traded, these kinds of things where huge amounts of money are moving around the world across economies. What happens to that?
I mean, the whole idea and the whole principle of blockchain is to facilitate their destruction, really, right? Like you don't want groups like that hanging around and making decisions. But it's important to remember, cryptocurrencies are inherently also very political. I mean, this is a combination of computer science, economics, and game theory. You're incentivizing people to interact, but those same people have incentives to collaborate with each other. So Bitcoin, when it was a New York agreement, I think it was in 2016 or 2017, where a group of mining pools got together in New York in a closed-door meeting and decided to make a fork. That's not supposed to happen. So again, it's trying to hit this ideal while still, trucking through all our human, intuition of grouping together and making decisions without other people.
So take us home, guys. Where would you recommend people go to learn more about this space and keep up with what's going on?
So I can speak from my own experience. When I decided that I wanted to become an expert in this, it was a very difficult journey. I don't know that anything I've ever done in business from a learning perspective ever took me as long as this. But one thing if I was going to say one thing is go out to the conferences and immerse yourself and do it outside of Miami. We went to a lot of different places. We went to Silicon Valley. We went to in LA. There's a big movement. One of our guys was in Dubai. We were in Puerto Rico, where a lot of this is going on. You have to sort of observe it from the people that are in the thick of it. And there's some of this in Miami, but it's not all here.
Nick?
Yeah, and I'll throw maybe a little bit of a wild card there. Like I mentioned, my background is in art, and I've been watching a lot of artists bring a very different, sometimes weird take on this technology. And one website that's been sort of collecting a lot of those more unconventional works is furtherfield.org, which is based out of London. They've actually been commissioning artists to experiment with the blockchain in really interesting and unusual ways.
Sam?
I would say go on CoinDesk. It's a great news resource, but also Reddit. Look at all these different coins and their subreddits. I mean, all the activity happens there. Everything.
Thank you so much, y'all, for your questions and your time. I'm sure these folks are eager to talk to you more about blockchain. I don't know anything about it, but I learned a lot. Hopefully you did too.